Oh, goody.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Zombies here again, and today we're back with another Marvel Snap video. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the Marvel Snap economy and where it is going wrong. So if you've been living under a rock for the past day or so, you might have missed the series drop announcement. And, well, I think a lot of people were hoping for more from it, but the drop itself isn't really the problem here, and I think it's just giving people a bit more of a reason to speak on an ongoing problem that has just made people more mad over time, because it feels like there isn't really an answer to the problem, or if there is, Second Dinner isn't really willing to give it to us. And that problem is card acquisition, right? So the late game experience in Snap is kind of rough when it comes to card acquisition. Unless you're willing to pay a pretty penny, the game is designed in a way to where it doesn't want you getting all of the cards. And for some players, that's fine. Some people don't want to play with all the cards, and if you're one of those players, Snap is probably more enjoyable for you. But it turns out in a game that is all about collecting and playing cards, people actually like getting to experiment and play with all the cards. It's a really shocking concept. Maybe someday someone at Second Dinner will realize this, but I don't have confidence in that happening anytime soon. But that's not the only problem plaguing the acquisition issues with the game right now. I think that's just one element, and so when people see these series drops that end up being disappointing to say the least. Basically, back when we got the Spotlight system as our first major post-launch revamp of card acquisition, the consensus was, hey, the system is a lot better, but the only way this system is going to stay better long-term is if we have regular series drops. And, well, that hasn't happened. But we have the concept of FSD, Flexible Series Drops, or as many players might be using nowadays, fuck Second Dinner. Because it feels very clear this company has no idea what they're doing anymore in terms of just their economic system, and they seem pretty afraid to mess with it because they're stuck between two options here. One option is they continue to do nothing and wax poetic about how we hear you and your voice matters and we're making changes and we know it's not sustainable. We get it, guys. We're just trying to figure it out. We'll talk to you when we know more in 2028. There's only so much of that you can do before people just stop believing you. So that's one side of it. And then the other side is if they do a whole economy overhaul, which I mean, frankly, seems like the only real option here. I don't think they're going to be tweaking the Spotlight system. I think they're going to go big or go home. They don't have a good track record of going big on it. Basically, every time they've reinvented card acquisition, it has failed in some way or another. And I don't expect whatever they do in the future to really be an exception to that rule. I might do some more in-depth coverage on some of the old acquisition systems because I know there are a lot of people who weren't around for it. But the TLDR was, when the game was in beta, they floated a very loot box gotcha system for new cards. The beta was all card game people. Card game people hated it. They said, well, this isn't a game for me. I'm going to quit your game. And yeah, I'm not going to recommend it to other people. And it turns out when your whole audience at that point is card game people, because remember, it's a beta, not a public release. Yeah, they kind of panicked and had to do something. And they were like, all right, we're going to get rid of this bad card acquisition system and we'll go back to the drawing board. And go back to the drawing board they did. And upon, December 2022, we got our first Series 5 and 4 cards. And, I mean, that system was far from perfect. It had a big issue of resources were scarce, and so people didn't really get to engage with a lot of the new releases, and it also resulted in a more stagnant metagame since everyone would save their resources, buy the one OP card of the month, and ignore all the less clearly OP cards available. That was just how the game kind of went for a while. But Second Dinner said, no, we hear you. We know this is a problem. We want people to engage with new releases. So we're going to make this new system and it's going to make everything great. And I'll say I had my doubts about Spotlights from the start. I definitely didn't hide that. But I think a lot of people, myself included, wanted to be more optimistic about the system because, well, the game was in not a great place in terms of actually getting people to meaningfully engage with the new content, which was pretty much bad for just about everybody. So it was nice to see, hey, now instead of getting your one card a month, with these spotlight weeks, you get multiple cards. It suddenly makes it way easier to engage with new releases, and that was, I mean, the best thing about spotlights. But when spotlights came out, the math was done, and spotlights as a system are designed to kind of rubber band you to this 70-80% collection complete mark. And the success of spotlights was also going to depend on how good series drops were, because the game just keeps adding more and more cards to the highest series. It's not dropping them regularly. There are no more Series 4 releases. And on top of that, they started doing an additional 12 more cards a year, with that first week no longer being a kind of catch-up week with old cards and the season pass. Now we get a new card and the season pass on the first week of every season. So they've added more cards to the game, but they have really not done much to improve the acquisition via the series drops. Frankly, I think this whole series system was best designed for its initial purpose, and now we're at a point with the game where it starts being more negative and convoluted than it does actually helping out the players. And I want to explain what I mean by this. So here on screen, we can see all the series drops that have happened in Marvel Snap. So you might notice early on in the top image, series drops are something that happened very regularly. January, February, March, April, May, June. And then after June, it stops entirely because of flexible series drops, and that was the last drop we had before the Spotlight cash system released, right? And we can see since then, we have had 3 more series drops. January 2024, June 2024, and December, with another one coming supposedly early next quarter. But they're saying they're going to put out that new series drop and that this one, you know, wasn't that big, but we're going to have another big one to make up for it. This is just normal scheduling. They're making it sound like, oh, you know, we're going to pump it out faster. I mean, you said there'd be 2 to 3 drops a year. We got 3 a year this year, and one of them was in January, and now we're maybe getting another one in January. Maybe it'll be a little later. I don't know. But it seems like they're going to be sticking to the same schedule with series drops. And the original idea of series drops and what was actually kind of pitched as from Mr. Broad himself was, hey, new cards are kind of expensive. You know, you can get your 1 freebie a month when you're Series 3 complete, but you're not going to be able to engage with them all right away. But that's okay because we have series drops. These will go down in price. They'll become more accessible through the collection track, buying with tokens, etc. And then eventually they become entirely free if you wait long enough. Unfortunately, this business model did not seem to work out for them. And I mean, I don't think anyone is overly surprised by that fact. They were giving away a lot of the game for free, and they were making it prohibitively expensive to engage with new content. And so one of the big changes we see from old series drops versus new ones is old series drops, it was purely about how long the card had been out for the card to drop. It didn't matter if the card was a super powerful meta player like Shuri, or a card that was some, you know, garbage that wasn't played at all like Super Scroll. Those cards came out at the same time, they drop at the same time. Now we just mostly drop worse cards. We keep the super powerful, highly desired cards in the higher series so we can bring them back in Spotlight caches. And Spotlight caches, another problem with the system that it currently has is their schedule is just so beyond whack, and it takes them 6 months or more to bring a card back, if the card even shows up at all. There are more Season Pass cards than I can count that I've released this year that have never shown up in a Spotlight cache. And when that is supposed to be the main way for people to engage with your card acquisition, because tokens are very scarce, especially for free-to-play players or pass-only players. Tokens are not a resource players have a whole lot of. So when things are just never coming back, or if you miss that 1 week window to get that card you really want, suddenly you're locked out of it for 6 months, I think that is an insane system. It exists to thrive on all this FOMO that you need to get it now or you're not going to have another chance for a really long time. And I think one of the things many players are coming to the conclusion of is, hey, I'm not having as much fun with this game as I used to. Why am I staying on their FOMO ride? Like, why am I staying here when they keep saying it's going to get better, and then it just doesn't get better? Eventually you lose faith in the company, and naturally, as happens with most games over time, people don't feel as good about Marvel Snap as a game as they did 1 year ago, 2 years ago. I did a whole little poll about it, getting over 500 responses, and out of those responses, a majority of players either played less Marvel Snap than they did 6 months ago, or play no Marvel Snap. A smaller amount play the same, and the smallest amount play more. Obviously, it's a smaller sample size and doesn't represent the whole community of people playing this game, but I think that's something very concerning to see among a more engaged portion of the player base. Think about it. If you're engaging with content creation stuff, you are more invested into the game. You might have spent some money, or if you haven't spent money, you've probably spent a bunch of time. Like, there is a level of investment to the game that players feel, which, you know, with all the FOMO bullshit, makes it so it's hard to step away from. But the flip side of that is when someone finally does quit, and I've seen this a number of times, Marvel Snap makes it really easy to stay gone, because the second you try to come back a month later, it just feels like you have been set in stone. Nothing has changed for you. You have the same resources, you have the same decks, nothing else has changed about your account. You're not getting anything to help you engage with whatever the game has changed into. And Marvel Snap changes a lot. It's a little bit slower this time of the year when we're only getting, one patch a month instead of two. But I think the point still stands that the game changes a lot and drastically, and that results in some decks going from top tier to not so great pretty quickly. And that doesn't mesh well with such a rigid acquisition system where some people are waiting, 6 months or more to get a card. You finally get that card, and all of a sudden, it's no longer the powerhouse it once was, or another key piece got nerfed, or maybe a new card came out during that 6 months that you didn't get that synergizes with it really well. So you have to wait another X amount of months. But at the end of the day, they've never really got the acquisition right. There have always been problems with it. And now it seems that those problems are likely hurting their bottom line more, because the game has just been earning less and less money. You're seeing various content creators talk about the performance and viewership going down. And I think this is definitely a big problem for the more dedicated people to the game. Because if you haven't noticed already in watching this video, in 2024, people like to be tuned into the games they really like playing. They like watching someone else play it. They like watching the card reviews or deck techs or even podcasts, people just talking about the thing that they like. And Snap's system has always created a challenge for people trying to create content around it. A great example of this is, what if I'm a new person who wants to do card game content? What if I wake up one day and decide, hey, I want to, record some videos about this card game that I just started playing and I really like? Well, don't look to Marvel Snap, because nobody cares. Nobody wants to watch the early Pool 3 experience, which takes months and months. Even if you're willing to spend money, it takes a long time to get through that experience. And then you might say, well, yeah, I'll have to do a little bit of grinding to get there. But once I get there, then it's easy. Then I can just engage with the new content like everyone else and do all this stuff. But it's like, no. Then you have a mountain of Series 4 and Series 5 cards that you do not have, which drastically limit your new options, both with old cards and with new cards. So it just seems pretty impossible for aspiring people who might want to create content to make content for this game. Whereas if they wanted to go create content for Hearthstone or Magic or Pokemon Pocket, the barrier is a lot less steep. Yeah, you can pay money if you want to accelerate it, but I think a lot of card game people are pretty okay with doing that, because that is what is asked of them in regular card games. Or you could still do the free-to-play route, and that also, at least right now, seems viable with a newer game like Pokemon Pocket. Who knows if that viability lasts over time? You could say the same thing about Snap back in the beginning, so only time will tell, but it's definitely one of the areas where Snap is very hostile to creators. And now you're seeing a lot of pretty successful creators raise all these concerns about the future. And if the people doing the best are saying, hey, this isn't looking very good, I'm not feeling real too good about, future prospects with this game, I might have to look elsewhere, that ends up being a very concerning sign to all the people who are, lower down on the totem pole, like myself. that means if this keeps going down this path, it's not going to be sustainable for anyone. And then people are just going to leave and quit and do other games. And you're already seeing that happen. People are trying to diversify. It's kind of hard to just wholly upend your audience, especially for like a card game. But now we're seeing competition with Pocket and the Bazaar. I mean, there are a lot of great games coming out right now. And Snap just isn't doing enough to really reassure the player base that, hey, yeah, I know these things have been taking a while, but we're really going to deliver when we do finally announce it and implement it. And I think the longer has gone on and the more negative things that have happened that have made people unhappy with Second Dinner as a company, there's just less reason to trust that message. And I think trust for that is at an all-time low. And frankly, there's really nothing for them to do other than deliver. It's just like nut up or shut up. Do the thing. Like, do it, and either it works or it doesn't. They have a lot more to lose if it doesn't than everyone else, though, because, you know, if it doesn't work and, you know, things get worse and people keep leaving the game, well, I'll go play another game. I'll go do something else. Whereas they have to continue running this kind of joke of a company. And I think they get it especially hard because they position themselves as this, hey, you know, you remember Ben Brode from Hearthstone. He really loves making games, but under the old tyrannical Activision Blizzard, he didn't have the freedom to do what he wanted. So now he started his own small indie studio where he doesn't have to listen to those corporate executives. He can do what he wants and make a fun game, and you don't have to worry about all that greed and whatnot. And then here we are, you know, over 2 years later, and it doesn't feel like Second Dinner is this scrappy underdog you're rooting for. It feels like they're just a smaller version of this endlessly hungry corporate overlord who demands that the bar keep rising and money be made infinitely long-term no matter the costs. And, well, I think eventually it starts to catch up with them, and we're starting to see that now. And the longer it takes for them to actually do something about this issue, the worse it'll get. And normally this would be the point in the video where I'd be like, hey, this is what you can do to fix your game and solve these problems. But frankly, that is not my fucking job. And myself, many others, countless others really, have suggested over the years why these things are problems, ways to improve upon them. Like, there's been a whole lot of discussion and suggestion, and it has resulted in just about no progress. So forgive me if I'm not exactly thrilled to come up with some new ideas to help them save their ass, because I just don't care. It's on them. Because at the end of the day, it's not my job to fix it. They have zero interest in having anyone try and help fix it. They're going to sink or swim on their own. Personally, basing off of past history, I think I know which outcome to expect, but I would hope they would prove me wrong for the sake of the game and, you know, their whole business. But you know what else doesn't help? This. Seeing messages like this go out. For a limited time only, you can purchase gold for 10% off. This is the best deal we've ever offered. Please, please, pay pigs, break out those wallets. And it's like, it's just so blatantly false. It's not the best deal they've offered. They used to run double gold, which was a heck of a lot more than 10%. Even if you look at some of the 4 cash bundles they've had in the past, they've been significantly over a 10% discount offering. But they got to do what they got to do to keep making the game churn out money. And many people like myself who enjoyed the game, spent a lot of time and money on it, we just don't feel that we're getting the same positive experience out of spending money on the game and supporting it that we used to. And I think a lot of that is baked into the fact that the time we've had watching how this company operates, people were more optimistic in the beginning when more things were unknown and we hadn't seen how Second Dinner really operated as a developer entity. But now that people are more familiar with it and have more, you know, set expectations based off of what has happened in the past, I think that's a huge reason for so much of the negativity around the game, particularly with the acquisition right now. Because when you go off of the past, which is the best thing we have to go off of, it paints a very not promising outlook for the future. To close things out, I think there are 2 responses here that we can compare that illustrate my point maybe better than anything. The first is one from Benjamin Brode himself, coming in at the end of 2022, shortly after the game launched. We have a lot to figure out with moving cards down series, but we have time to figure that out. However, I will say at some point, the cards entering Series 5 to 4 need to be equal cards among being downgraded from 4 to 3, or else token shop cards will infinitely inflate, causing new players to have an insurmountable hill to climb. What this means is if we add one new card a week to Series 5, you'll see one card go from Series 4 to 3 a week as well, on average. So even players who never spend a single token will eventually have the same pace of new cards, just a little bit later on. And as we can see in, the current year, that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen at all. And surprise, surprise, what Ben here has predicted has become exactly true. It just keeps inflating and it feels insurmountable for a new player or a player who has maybe lapsed and decided to come back at another point in time. It just feels like there isn't a reliable method to catching back up, getting back on the train, so to speak. And then we have the recent answer about the cards we got announced dropping the other day. While these series drops may help players along their journey, it's not intended to fix the core issues we're all feeling around card acquisition. Which, yeah, I'm sure they're really feeling it in those $5 million per month sales, right? But hey, it's less than it was, so maybe they are feeling it. Who knows? But it's okay. The team remains focused on a larger long-term solution that we are not going to share with you or even give a estimated ETA on, because yeah, why would we do that when we clearly have no idea what we're doing? Yeah, it's just kind of a joke at this point. Ben's main point at the start was, hey, don't worry, we have time, we'll figure it out. And well, 2 years later, it feels like not only have they not figured it out, it feels like they have just kept kicking the can down the road as long as it continues to make money. But now that it's making less money, they're like, oh shit, guys, we really do need to figure this out. And it turns out our convoluted philosophy about unique collections and having a card per week release system doesn't really work well with this shitty ass economy someone drew up 3 years ago. Crazy, right? Crazy. Yeah, that's it. I don't have anything else to add. I think Snap is in a bad place right now, and I don't particularly expect it to be treated with the agency it deserves in terms of them speeding out a fix, because they're worried if the fix will make it worse, like it did with Spotlight's long term, which is a fair thing to worry about, but this time around, time does not seem to be on their side. So we'll have to wait and see what the future holds, but in terms of like outlook on Marvel Snap right now, feels like it's anything but positive from the more dedicated community side, which can also be seen with the fact that after the series drops announcement happened, the game has been pretty heavily negatively review bombed on Steam by some of those dedicated players. That's going to wrap it up for this one, though. Yeah, I have a lot to say about economy stuff. Check out the streams if you want to hear more. And let me know if you'd be interested in seeing a little bit of the history behind the card acquisition stuff. I've had a video for Nexus events planned for a while because I know most people weren't around back then. They might want to see what was the original acquisition system that was so bad it almost killed the game. I think that would be a fun topic of discussion, as well as where it went from there to release and beyond. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. A little rambly, but I know some people enjoy that. So I hope you did. If you did, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.